Hello there, Jar of Marble listeners and Jar of Marble curious. Welcome to my podcast. My name is Linda, where I talk about everything and anything that has brought me to this stage of my life. This week, I want to talk about coffee. And as you know, there's many types of coffee. There are more kinds of words to describe coffee or different types of coffee that you can purchase than we have to even describe love. I love going to cafes and I really love coffee. Some people read coffee cups as a kind of a ritual after they've had their coffee, usually like a beautiful Turkish coffee, which I tried for the first time something like 30 odd years ago. A Turkish neighbour, beautiful people, invited me over for a cup of coffee, and I've got to say, at that stage of my life, I had not tasted anything so amazing. But apparently, recent research shows that 90% of adults in the world consume some kind of caffeine. But back to reading coffee cups, for example, with so many different cultures, folklore, superstitions, irrational magic, storytelling, or oral storytelling is connected to coffee. Coffee was a big part of my life when I had different cafes. Interestingly, when I first opened up my first cafe, I didn't have a coffee machine. I had never tried espresso coffee really in my life at that stage, and I would serve instant coffee, which now I say that I think, oh my God, shush, Bob. But you know, the whole idea of coffee, everything that coffee brings to the table, what it represents, the gathering of people to have a coffee, meeting with business clients or clients of any kind, and let's have a coffee. There is a call to, I was going to say duty, but it's not really duty, is it? It's a call to get together, have a coffee, have a cup of tea, or whatever it is your choice is. But yeah, so this week we're going to talk about coffee, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. The subject of coffee, this will probably only really talk to the people who are converts or obsessive about coffee, perhaps people that just really like coffee. It's just become such an important part of society in most societies, with the incredible works of art, with designs that just amaze and delight, signature designs, these clever chop artwork created with the milk to make a super delicious latte, for example, and all the other many types of la crème that is formed on coffee by baristas. So it is said with roasting coffee beans, you know, much like cooking, the more it's cooked, you're tasting the work of the chef, and the less it's cooked, you're tasting the work of the farmer. Coffee is a beautiful, magical bean. I remember I lived on a property way up north for a period of time, and in the backyard was this big coffee tree. I didn't know that at the time that it was a coffee tree. I just noticed lots and lots of beans, red beans, all over this tree that were gradually starting to turn green, and there were hundreds of little mini trees growing in the ground where where the beans had fallen from the trees and were just growing so beautifully in the ground. So I decided that I was going to start planting all these little coffee little seedlings, and my daughter Ashley helped me. There was a sort of a portion of a greenhouse that was still fairly covered, but we realized that we needed more room, so then we covered in a big corner of the outside porch, and we found all these leftover pots everywhere on this property, and we just potted up. I mean, I think we got to something like 4,000 coffee seedlings. Fortunately, life took another turn and we went off on another adventure, but I just remember the excitement of that because I was doing a little bit of research in the area, and there were a few areas that were claiming to be growing really wonderful coffee because they had the land was on the right slope, and the land was, you know, just the right mix, and the rain was great, and more boutique coffee makers were popping up everywhere. And I sort of thought, well, why not me? Because at that stage I had a couple of cafes that I sold coffee in, because the first couple of cafes I had, I didn't. Not espresso coffee. It just wasn't really big in our society at that stage. And I don't even know if I even knew the word espresso coffee. But hey, that's not to say it wasn't happening. I'm sure it was. But in the circles that I was traveling and where I was at the time, no one even asked for it. So, excuse me, but coffee has been known as giving us energy, helpful with hangovers, to help keep us awake during nights of working, driving, or studying. And the grounds are a natural byproduct of coffee and can be used in your garden, like fertilizing your soil. To this day, I keep my coffee grounds and I throw them into my composter. I throw them just on top of the soil and just let nature, weave its magic. So it's also really good for neutralizing odors. Like even if you were to put some in a fridge overnight, even you can put them in your smelly shoes. Smelly shoes, smelly shoes. Or after chopping onions, you can rub it into your hands to get rid of smells. You can also use it to exfoliate skin. You can mix it with water or with coconut oil. But by the time I'd gone into my third business, my third cafe, I was set up in a rural community, but really close to the highway, very close to the ocean. Actually, I was on a main highway. I was on a petrol base, and there was this tiny little shop. And when I first found the shop, I had stopped for petrol and went into this wee shop looking for a bite to eat. And I got chatting, and it turned out that the people that owned it at the time just wanted out. I also noticed they had bare feet. So a month later, I took over. My kids started a country school, getting onto a country bus every day, and the school bus stopped on the petrol base where other parents waited for their kids to arrive. But I was told by many people, again, that the business was doomed. I was told that no one had ever been able to make it work. And as it was, when I had first decided, yes, I was going to take this business over, the people that I bought it from, I've got to give credit where credit due. They kept that business so clean. They kept the shop so very, very clean, but they never really opened it. They sort of opened it, closed it. They liked to party, so it wasn't really a good fit for them. And they gave me the books. So I remember going to bed with the books, and they were probably the most frightening thing that I'd ever seen in my life. One owner, apparently, prior to the owners that I bought it from, didn't have a car and he used to have to hitch a ride to his home, which was still another 30 plus kilometres down the main highway. One time he got killed, unfortunately. He was hit by a car. So other people apparently who had bought the shop would just throw their hands up in the air and they would just close the doors, literally just close the doors. So I saw it as a real possibility. For starters, I was planning on running it 7 days a week. I was there to, create a vibe, create a cafe, cook all my vegetarian and all my different foods that I cooked, because by that stage I'd realised that I had a formula. And anything that you would have done in your life, you would have noticed patterns that certain things just work. So if you've got a formula, don't change it. Add to it, but don't change the basic formula. So I opened up my cafe. I got all my artwork done, as in me on big A4 cardboard wads of quite thick paper. I would write all the individual burgers, with a dollop of this and a splash of that, and the price. And there was a little corner in the shop where I could hide and watch people's reactions when they were eating burgers, because I was hitting a whole new market. I didn't know how I was going to be received. These people were rural people, and some of them had homes and properties miles inland, and if there was a lot of rain, they would get stuck on the other side of the river, and sometimes you wouldn't see them for weeks on end until the river went down, and then they'd be back out getting petrol at the petrol base, which was also like a trading store where people could buy anything from thongs, jandals, through to a box of matches and get your petrol. And if they wanted to, they could get fish and chips, hamburgers, takeaway food. I then started really going into making relishes and sauces in a really big way, because I needed to make my shelves in my shop look pretty. So I had the the sort of country-looking jars made from brown paper. I hand drew all the labels with little pictures. I put little sparkly things. I was so dedicated. But then what happened was people started buying them, which was a bit disappointing to me at the time because they were my ornaments. What are you doing? Oh, stop complaining. Oh, shut up, Bob. What would you know? Anyway, over a period of time, I realised that in itself had become a separate business. So I used to have to go into quite a bit of production. I had to start buying really big pots and make a big pot of mango relish and a big pot of Thai sauce or tomato relish or plum or chili. Chili was a really, really popular one. I remember one time this guy walked in. He said, give me your, he spoke exactly like that. Give me your hottest, sounds like Bob, doesn't he? Give me your hottest chili burger. And I thought, love a challenge. So with my chili burgers, I used to put chili all through the actual meat, as well as cayenne pepper, anything hot really. And then I used to make a mild, medium and hot chili relish. So by the time I put on extra chili, extra cayenne, anything hot onto this burger, I knew that this would probably be one of the hottest burgers that this guy ever tried. Well, his face went immediately red, his eyes started to run, beads of sweat started forming on his forehead. Oh, it wasn't bad, he said. He became a regular. But, chili, sort of like coffee, there are people out there who are really addicted, and the hotter the better. They like to push the envelope a little bit by having really supersonically hot burgers. And I loved it when someone would come in and ask for one, and I would explain that I had real chilies, homegrown chilies, because I was also growing all my own herbs as well, and it wasn't some mass-produced, weird coloured, orangey, coral, mass-produced yuck, and they called it chili sauce and tasted nothing like chili sauce. But they turned out to be incredibly popular. There was no back door in the shop. And the reason why this is important to tell you, because one day I was in the shop and this guy walked in. And if you're listening, Andrew, this is for you. This guy walked in, long hair, blowing in the wind. He had on a leather waistcoat, a bare front, jeans, and he walked in and asked me if I sold coffee. And I went, well, I can get you a cup of Nescafe if you like. Well, it was as though I was, being a heathen in the church. Hallelujah. Anyway, turns out that Andrew was this amazing coffee roaster and was incredibly passionate about his coffee. And so we got talking, and he told me he was going to come down and organise a machine, and we'll organise some beans, and we'll have a bit of a play, as he said. And that was it. It was a game changer for me. I could not believe how beautiful his coffee was, to the point that I eventually travelled up to Sydney, met his wife Jenny. They had a coffee in Randwick called Coffee and Things, and it was just fabulous. It was just a fabulous cafe, and he loved my cafe. He was delighted to find my cafe in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a highway, selling vegetarian and vegan food. Nobody was doing that at that stage. There wasn't a market for it. There would have been, because a lot of people would walk in, and it might sometimes be a mum and dad with 4 kids and couldn't believe that they could actually buy their kids vegetarian food. So anyway, even people that were full-blown meat eaters, sometimes on Monday after a really hard weekend, it was like, oh, give me a couple of your spinach and pumpkin burgers, love. They spoke like that. No, they did. No, they didn't. Yes, they did, Bob. You weren't there. Yes, I was. Well, you might have been, but I didn't know you then. I didn't hear you then. You weren't so apparent. Bob. Shush. Anyway, so Andrew came down and brought down the machine, taught me how to use the machine, and eventually I was able to go up to Sydney and go to his factory, and he was able to make me a personal blend, a blend that I loved, that would then become my signature coffee blend for my cafe. I mean, it's really wonderful. It was so exciting, and this taste was just beautiful. In fact, I loved the coffee so much, and so did my customers. I mean, the profit margin in coffee back then was crazy good, and it still is now. But when I moved to New Zealand for a year, some years later, the coffee was that good that Andrew used to ship the coffee to me to New Zealand. And that's how good his coffee was. I was not risking having to go through finding other people, and they wouldn't have his passion or his zest or his talent for making amazing coffee. And he was making signature coffees for many cafes around New Zealand, not New Zealand, beg your pardon, around Sydney, around Australia. So this is a shout out to you, Andrew. I don't know whether he's actually ever going to hear this podcast, but still, if he does, I mean, credit due, 100%. So anyway, we always remained friends. Sometimes we come down to see the family, and if I was in Sydney, I always pop in and say g'day. But coffee was an enormous part of my life, an enormous part of my cafe, and people would come in just for a coffee and or coffees, and sometimes I would just be so busy, especially because it was a petrol station. Buses would be pulling up and 30 people would be getting out for a coffee, and sometimes, depending on the day, I might have been the only person there. And I had this ritual where I'd go into the back end of the kitchen, and we're talking tiny kitchen, and I would run around in circles. I don't know why I did that, but it made me feel better. And then I would go out and go, okay, let's get going, let's make some coffee. My next adventure, my next cafe, I had moved to New Zealand, and I found the shop that was directly across the road from a boys' high school, and boarders lived there nearly all year round. I thought it was just positioned perfectly. Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, the shop had been really run down, and it had shelves in it that had old, dusty, see-through lace curtains hanging down in front of them, and there was nothing on the shelves behind these curtains. There were too many fridges, most of which were standing in darkness with no stock in them, and one fridge that the lights flickered, which was kind of super creepy, with maybe 4 cans of some nondescript beverage inside it. A woman stood behind the counter with a fountain of hair springing out from the centre point of her head, like you'd see in really small children. And I just couldn't stop looking at it. I was like, don't look at it. But I found that I was, oh, you looked. Yes, I did, Bob, I did. She was maybe 70 years old. I think that was why I was looking. I was trying to marry this hairstyle, this look. But anyway, each and all to their own, right? But anyway, so I spoke to her briefly and ascertained that she had long run out of her lease and she actually wanted out of the shop. And I told her that I was looking at taking over a shop and asked for details of the landlord, which she gave me. I made an appointment with him, set up a meeting, which we had, and long story short, I took over the business. At that point, I then had to put in cafe cooking equipment, deep fryers and grills, and because it had always been run as a dairy or just a little food shop where you could buy newspapers, a loaf of bread and a pie, basically, and one of the 4 beverages that were in the fridge. So I had tables and chairs put in, got rid of all the curtains, pulled away most of the creepy shelves and painted, put down new tiles, put in 2 cash tills and 2 EFTPOS facilities, because there were a lot of boys who were going to be coming to the shop directly across the road. There was even a pedestrian crossing which went from their side of the road, and actually once you got off the crossing and onto the footpath, the next few steps led you directly into the door of my shop. I know, right? I mean, I saw all this, a double-fronted shop that just looked like it'd been there for 100 years and no one had made any changes. I could not believe that no one had jumped on this. So we were ready to rock, basically. Soon after, I renovated a van into a food delivery van. Painted it sort of a bright pink, mauvey colour with the logo, We Do Do's. And it all went kabang. It was busy from the first thing in the morning to the end of day, plus there was a bus stop directly outside the shop as well, and there was a bus stop across the other side. So there'd obviously be boys arriving, to school, and then they would be leaving sometimes on my side of the road to go to, their various destinations. So if they weren't buying hamburgers or ice creams or Chupa Chups, lollipops or cans of drink, or they would sometimes come over and just play cards. They might have a coffee or something like that. The van that I had renovated delivered morning teas to the north side of the town, my hometown, and that developed very, very quickly. And so while the shop was looking after the growing boys and really young men, that's not counting the people who were ordering takeaway and coming in for coffees and lunches and ultimately dinners. It was, how can I say, very, very busy. So this was 1997. I heard the news on the radio in that cafe that Princess Diana had died. It was the 31st of August, and everybody just stopped. And it was a full lunch hour, full everybody. And somehow people heard that, which was quite incredible. And I was also, while in New Zealand, performing in the Rocky Horror Show. I was opening, closing the show, Candy Cane Girl with science fiction, and I also played the role of Magenta. So many members of the cast were coming in for coffee. I mean, it was a vibe. People I knew and hadn't seen for a while were starting to come into the cafe, and I've got to say, that was kind of interesting. People that I had not seen for at that stage, maybe 16, 20 years, and they'd come and go, "Oh, hi, Linda, how are you?" And I'd go, "I'm great, thanks, how are you?" They clearly knew me, honestly. Most I just didn't know who they were. People, I think, change a lot in 20 years, and also because I had been doing shows and I was in a rock band, I think sometimes when you are the one that's providing the entertainment, people feel that they know you, but you might not ever meet them, so you don't actually have memory of them. Some people were vaguely, I think, I do, maybe I know you, but people were flying in to see me from Australia and up north to see me in Rocky and hang out at the cafe while they're on holiday. So ultimately, it was nothing for me to drink 16 to 20 cups of coffee a day. I know, but I did. Oh, you didn't? Yeah, I did. And I could have a cup of coffee and go to sleep. I mean, it was, something I was seriously addicted to, and I didn't feel like it was harming me in any way. So when my girls were home from school, they would sit on the other side, either side of me, Carla on my lap, while we socialised with friends in the cafe. My older daughters would man the shop in the quieter times, later in the day, selling Chupa Chups and cans of drink. I mean, we sold a lot of lollipops, but that was really good for them. It got them used to giving change, customer service, being polite, which was, I think, sort of challenging in a way because my eldest daughter had only started high school and my other daughter was 3 years younger. So, high school boys were coming in to buy things, but, they handled themselves really well. And, yes, I'm proud. I'm very proud. So the memories of building that cafe with the proceeds of the sale of my last business in Australia meant that I had a firm formula in place. I have spoken about formulas before, and I just kept replicating the menu and adding new recipes as I got a feel for what my particular customers wanted. Like books, rereading your favourite books and rewatching your favourite video at different stages of your life, the plot never changes, but your perspective does. And as it was for me at that stage, my fourth cafe, but this time it was in my hometown in New Zealand, it was a happy life. My cafe and my 3 daughters, my employees. Aside my family, my happiness was tied to a goal and my ideas, and I guess the freedom to implement them. And boy, oh boy, that was a super wise decision to tie myself to a goal. More wise than I could have ever known at the time. But time sure exposes who's who in the zoo, right? And the who's who, I think of them occasionally when I'm dunking my biscuits in my tea and I hold it under until the bubbles stop. Oh, stop it! Quite right, Bob, I should. I had created something that wasn't there before, and I was really proud of that. The Rocky Horror Show finished, and it was time to go back to Australia. Turned out it wasn't where any of us were destined to be. It was 11 months in total. Sometimes, most times, you just cannot go back. It had all been inspired by a friend in New Zealand who had telephoned me in Australia with the question, "When are you coming home?" And right in that moment, I decided to do it. Sold my Australian highway business and took my 3 daughters to New Zealand. It will forever interest me what motivations lie behind big decisions. Obviously, I was at a stage of my life as in what next? And it is interesting how certain things align and another adventure within an adventure ensues. There are, however, no shortcuts. It actually takes time to build a better and stronger version of your business and therefore stronger and better version of yourself. April Green said, "Some memories never leave you. Like salt in the sea, they become a part of you and you carry them." I enjoy the space between where you are and where you're going. And sometimes you can be just really aware that you are in that in-between space and you know that it's time to start something new, head in another direction, and just trust in the beginnings. I don't even think it's a conscious decision to, trust in beginnings. It's just something in you calls out and you just go for it. And certainly that's how it felt for me. Change never scared me. It, in fact, has sustained me. It has felt like a requirement, really. Well, paint me green and call me a pickle. Look at the time. I'm thinking that it might be about time that I said goodbye. And you know what? It's beautiful to live without regret. And I hope that you do too. So I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for passing by. It's always lovely. Okay, bye.